and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few people get together and we gather around and we try to make a story about it for you. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Well, we're starting fresh, kind of. What story elements did you guys have?
I have beginning scene.
I have economic system.
I have sequel.
Cool.
So should I go first or should beginning scene go first? What do you guys think?
Well, I think beginning scene should go first. It's not gonna. I think this'll work with sequel. I think.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Unless we want economic system to go first.
No,
let's do beginning scene first. Let's hear it, Reed.
Okay. Asher had been in the saddle since first light. After 4.5 hours, the sun still stood high in a cloudless blue sky. 2 hours before noon, he was nearing the southern edge of the ranch, a vast holding of marginal range land first established by his grandfather, now worked raising cattle and horses by his father and 2 brothers. The dusty, rolling scrub and grassland rises slowly to mountains in the west. Asher could hear the crunch of dry, brittle grass in a puff of dust with each footfall of his horse. 2 weeks ago, he had worked the gates at the spring farther north, flooding an irrigation ditch running south along a ridge set to water an expanse of pasture land. He was hoping to find a good new growth upon which he could the cattle could graze. And as he crested the hill, he was met with the scene of a large herd of cattle munching the tender new grass, protected by at least 5 armed men keeping watch. This is not their land.
That's it?
That's it.
All right. That's kind of good. So, this is a sequel of our previous story about the baseborn wizards and their fight against, well, it's not really their fight against Darren, but we had our hero, we had our wise old man, we had Darren who's trying to bring back sort of a pantheon of magic users. If you can use magic, you were kind of said to be descendant through unwedded means of the original 5 wizards that had kind of ruled the world thousands of years ago. This story takes place approximately 800 to 1,000 years later. Immediately following the sealing, where the wise old man sealed the Dark One into the ground, or the city that they were in was one of the places where the Dark Lord was sealed, and the wise old man did it again. There was great uproar and social change, right? There was turmoil. 3 of the 5 schools were broken and destroyed as people sort of felt like the magic users had taken advantage of them one too many times. And now we're looking at a world that's pretty different. They still remember their past, but they don't sort of hold to any bonds. All bonds have been broken, such as it is. One of the key sort of things that happened was people saw the sealing ritual that the wise old man did, and when the wise old man sealed the Dark One, he himself turned into what could be considered like a statue of solid spirit, right? It looked kind of marble-esque, but it became sort of a statue of solid spirit. And this, as the world kind of fell into chaos for about 100 to 200 years, this wasn't figured out until much later, as most of the baseborn were hunted down because they kind of were outnumbered by the normal people. They were hunted down and they were imprisoned or killed. You know, there's no way to stop a baseborn from being able to use their power, and so just kind of, it was killing rather than not. And like kind of a recycling of times, the amount of people who could use these elemental abilities shrank as well. Finally, a kind of crusader, a kind of inquisitor group rose up, and they said that they followed in the path of the wise old man who saved us all from the baseborn threat, right? and they had somehow divined or figured out the way to not take the power away from a baseborn and put it into a household god like the original wise old man had been doing, but to instead crystallize the power in a person and kill them, but then also convert their body into like a sort of a crystalline structure of whatever power that they were mostly, you know. So if they were mostly fire, they would turn into sort of a red granite statue. If they were water, they would turn into a blue crystalline structure that water seemed to move in. And at first it was enough to destroy them, but then as things went along, more of the Dark Lord's sort of hidden caches of weapons and power began to arise, and we see sort of an industrial revolution take place, where the machinery is primarily powered by the crystalline force, the crystalline structure of the elements. So I would say this could also be considered a new magic system, right? Where to find someone who can actually wield the power anymore is very rare, but what instead there is just a lot of crystals, dust of different colors that you combine together to, shoot fireballs out of a gun, or, to power trains or to power flying machines, and it all represents, if people really think about it, the industry represents the covert kidnapping and killing of the baseborn. But it's been so many years that now, and there's just so much conflicting kind of evidence and kind of information that most people have kind of forgotten that that's where this power crystals and everything comes from, is from actual people, who were rounded up in mass hundreds of years ago and created these giant stores of power. So you have, these houses. People are just kind of moving around now to wanting to sort of, consolidate power and create countries, but through it all, there's kind of this holy church, this kind of Inquisition, Crusader-esque people who hunt down the baseborn, even the ones who, they started out hunting down the ones who survived, and now they're hunting down just people who show the power, and that they harvest them and use them to create more of this wealth, of these crystals, of this power source, that the whole world runs on. And the people at the very end, the people doing the hunting down really don't know this. They feel convicted. They have their convictions. They're very strong and stalwart that they're saving the world. The people, however, who these baseborn get delivered to, who then force the baseborn to do this sealing ritual to, to keep them, to turn them into this power source, they very do know. So it's just an example of an organization where the outliers, the people actually doing the work, feel like they're doing the right thing, but they're really just funneling things into evil men, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it.
So this world looks basically completely different. Two of the schools are still around. They're the kind of the most remote and the most hidden. The other ones have been destroyed and overrun. So that's the world that we live in as a sequel. How's that sound?
Cool.
Yeah. I think that'll play in really well with what I had for economic system. And as you're explaining that, kind of puts the parameter on what exactly this economic, monetary system that they use comes from.
Great.
So when you said it was a sequel, I was thinking, oh, that would be perfect because perfect way to instill this the same way that the wise old man would then seal out that power, right? So yada yada yada. As you were talking, it developed into basically, so when they slaughtered all the other baseborn, right, and made them into these crystalline structures, which fuel the
Industry,
technologically
really.
technological industry as like a coal or like a battery, right?
Yeah.
Every time they would kill them, like at first when they'd start killing them and they'd be sealing them, they would might seem kind of gruesome, but they'd take their eyes, right? Which then when they would be pulled out, they would shrink up into like a coin
Okay.
that would then look like, the pupil within the iris, and then almost have like that crystalline metallic, like no one could ever find this material. It would be different enough from maybe the actual crystal, so it's not like double associated,
Yeah, not connected to it at all.
not connected to it. And so that's what everybody uses as currency, is those. And so it makes a limited amount, right? I mean, there
Right.
was millions of baseborn, so there's millions of, currency that would go around, right?
Right.
And so they can get more by hunting them off, or by basically capturing them and then raising them in underground facilities to either use as their pawns. Because I kind of take it that these people that run it, they're baseborn, kind of like the way that most organizations like that, they are the thing that they are trying to eliminate,
Right.
but they just want to eliminate it for everybody else.
Right.
And so I have like an idea that would come from that they would and basically get them as children or just capture them and underground facility, because that's where they get their monetary wealth from, and then they would harvest them for their because again they wouldn't be able to fuel their economy by just killing off or using the ones that they already did. There might have been a lot of them, but the coal burns up, right? I mean, I know it's not coal,
Right.
but
Yeah. It's not a renewable resource.
right. And so I think that's what they're doing, is they're somewhere, and maybe that's what they're using the other two schools for. And maybe they've transformed them into, all right, the church
Mills.
of the mills or whatever it is.
Yeah, I have this whole vast, like, unseemly kind of underbelly where, you get anybody that has quote unquote the spark, like from their lineage, that have the tendency, it shows up like in your past there had been baseborn. So like, whether you show any magic ability or not, you just hunt it down and killed and they take your eyes, and just, this could get really ugly, you know?
Yeah, you could
Like,
also.
how can you tell a counterfeit eye from an actual baseborn eye?
Right.
Well, because they are baseborn eyes, only they've kind of like that crystalline.
So I think Seth's idea is that people don't know that they're the eyes. Just like people
Oh,
don't know that this magical essence that they use to run industry is actual baseborn. People are afraid of the baseborn and look to the Inquisition to sort of save them.
okay.
And what I was thinking
That's what they
is,
call them. They do call them eyes,
oh,
but
that
no
makes
one is,
sense.
because they look like it. Because they look like a pupil and an iris that then kind of like quartzes out or whatever, kind of takes
Oh, so like
shape out.
they take on this crystalline form, so you'd have to have the quote unquote spark in it in order for it. Otherwise, they would just deteriorate like any normal eyeball.
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
okay.
I like
That
your idea, though, Reed.
yeah.
Um, Part of the thing I was thinking of is this world could also be really run by lineage charts.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to get a job, you bring your Inquisition stamped lineage, to make sure that you don't have any troublemakers in your lineage.
Hmm.
So there's always this person, son of this person, son of this person, son of this person, this
Right.
person, son of that person, son of that person. This just kind of like you have to prove that you're not this.
Hmm.
In a way, kind of what we'd imagine, because at the end of last week's episode, there was this kind of like really aggressive nature between the baseborn, who felt like they were more because they were kind of being told that they could be gods,
Hmm.
and normal humanity. And unfortunately, what we're seeing happened was that humanity won.
Right.
The not humanity, because baseborns were technically human too, but the non-magic people won.
Hmm.
And this is the result of sort of the overzealous nature,
Yeah.
then fueled by forbidden knowledge and forbidden technique, to remove people's, to basically, they took the ritual that the wise old man used to seal the Dark One,
Mm-hmm.
and as the topper for the seal, he sacrificed himself,
Yeah.
and they used that ritual to force Baseborn to seal and sacrifice
Yeah,
themselves.
and sell the whole thing. Yeah, you're baseborn and it sucks to be you, but look, you get to become immortalized in this
Right,
thing, and
right,
you'll be revered by your descendants,
right.
and it's like, yeah, but I'm gonna die and this isn't so much fun for me.
And maybe at the beginning it was really played up as like, we have to seal the Dark One away every year, So at the beginning they kind of
Oh,
got
oh,
the Baseborn to play into it, but then all of a sudden they were like, we don't need to do this. This was like a once every 2,000 year thing. The sealing that the wise old man did was enough for 10,000 years by
mhm,
sacrificing himself, and but before they could sort of react to this, the people in charge had already kind of pushed it too far.
right,
And so we're left with this system here.
yeah,
I like it. I'm thinking kind of like a steampunk, kind of steampunky. You know what I mean, Seth? Like,
Yeah.
there's like the old system. We're still using swords and stuff like that, but there are people who use like guns.
hmm
There is still magic, but it's kind of a little bit more refined. I think about like, because all this technology started to surface from the Dark Lord. Darren had the pile, and the big golem, and that crashed down, and people, it was like this great revelation when people who weren't baseborn could just pour this crystalline structure, which they found in the Dark Lord's stores, because he knew how to do this. He was doing this
right,
all the time. And they're like, wait, I can make this ship fly, and
yeah,
I don't need to be a baseborn in order to do it.
right,
And so we're seeing where before it was really kind of medieval, now we're seeing something a lot more advanced, all supported by this this
hmm
the question is there any answer to this that doesn't include the death of people?
yeah,
Is there some way that a baseborn or something could channel?
Well, I think so because I think the answer's in the it's the same thing that the wise old man did. Only what they saw him do, so that's what they know that he's doing, takes the whole baseborn. Because before, remember, he was taking. Well, now one of them died, but I think, and this is what I was originally coming at with the monetary system, but then I altered it a little bit. But a baseborn, let's say there's another thing like what he was doing with the household gods back in the day, is he would then endow them or endue them or whatever with some of that essence. So I think
Right.
that would be possible,
Okay.
to like basically as a baseborn to like summon or seal like spirit or water or whatever it is into another object.
Right. Kind of like
But
how
again,
in kind of like how in the Lightbringer series, spoilers for the Lightbringer series here. Kind of
ooh,
like how in the Lightbringer series, the Prism would use the what was it called? The blinding knife,
yes,
right? He was supposed to use the blinding knife every 7 years on a drafter, and they would either get their power taken away, or maybe they would just get their irises reset, or maybe they would be given a different color.
yeah,
Like, that kind of exchange was supposed to happen. you know the ability to wield these elements wasn't given to the baseborn so that they could it was dispersed throughout the people so that they could sort of return it back to the world, like what the wise old man was doing, right?
yeah.
Not so that they could take it out of the world. So what we're seeing is a huge cycle, maybe coming back around to the rise of the Dark Lord, with the continual stripping out of the population the abilities to use this, and sort of distilling it away from the people. At some point, who knows if we want to make this a giant loop, but at some point we might have 5 wizards, 5 people who consume large quantities of this crystalline structure and become the 5 heroes of the elements in order to fight the Dark Lord, who has successfully removed the power from the people again.
Mm-hmm.
It's a giant cycle that
Right.
happens. And every time it happens, someone like the wise old man gets sent down to try and move the power back into nature and back to the people. This is just another way of trying to solve the problem of discordia and chaos.
Right.
Anyways, I think we've talked enough about this beginning. I think let's go next week and we'll draw new elements, and we'll go next week and add to this. I think that there's a lot of oh, Reed, I wanted to say to your thing, the hero's sidekick in the previous story, wasn't he from like the country?
Well, yeah, see, because like his grandfather recognized that he was base born, but
Right.
he didn't. He moved. He just went out and moved out and set up this ranch, like out in like the wilderness, kind of, because he wanted to get away, and he used his power to like find springs of water, and he had wherever he dug a well, he would be able to get. So he would be able to bring life to a real rough piece of land, and
Right.
they were cattle ranchers, and
Well,
raised horses, and then it was Mose, who was one of his grandsons, and one of his brothers was had joined the mercenary group of Troy, the hero who was kind of gathering the non-base born into like an army of people that were ready to move, and part of the when the wise old man kind of made his play, and all that, they were, well, what about the non-base born? They should have a stake in what's going on here, and
yeah, that was all the last story. So I'm thinking
yeah.
that this your beginning scene, since it's like kind of cattle rancher stuff like that, it's either some some descendant of Mose
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
or some connected to that area in some way.
Yeah, and I, introduce, like, because of the chaos that ensued, here somebody else has moved out there, and they're trying to make a go of it, and they see this well-watered area of pasture, and they drive their cattle out on it. So now you got the like a range war. Like, how do you resolve this conflict? There here we had the irrigation. We set up this, the our cows have to move, and we were counting on this pasture land, and now these other people are on it, and they're armed, and what what's going to ensue here as far as law and order, as far as the righteousness of the cause? Does this guy think that this land is just open for the grabbing, even though we were the ones that established it? I mean, it just creates, is it wild wild
Yeah,
west?
this seems like a great bit of beginning conflict as a
Right.
way to sort of pull in a hero or a hero sidekick or something.
Yeah.
So let's come back next week with that then.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you would like to give us your ideas on what you think we should do next, I'd love to hear them. In fact, I will include them if you let me know. You can email me at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com, or you can at me on Twitter at @getsbettercast. If you didn't like this story, if you think we should move on to something sci-fi, something like a romance novel, maybe something like Highlander or something more Stephen King-y, I would say just wait. It gets better.